Welcome to Personality Hacker TV, Season 1, Episode 3. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
I'm Antonia Dodge.
We're glad you're here. If you've listened to our podcast, our audio podcast, the end of every podcast, we always say you didn't have a microphone. You couldn't talk. You're part of our conversation, but if you want to make your voice known, come over to personalityhacker.com and leave a comment or ask a question. Well, today you don't have to do that. You can do that. But if you're listening live, there's a live call-in number in the description and also in the comment fields that you can call and be live on the air with us here on Personality Hacker TV. Our goal and vision for this show is to be able to take live calls from you, workshopping your questions around typology, and that could be a Myers-Briggs system, Enneagram, or another typology system, or it could be personal growth questions, maybe relationship questions, or business career questions, or how does your personality type and the way you show up in the world, how does that affect your personal growth path and your career and your relationships and all that stuff. So we're going to open it up for you to be able to call. So go ahead and call that number. You'll be put on hold, and whenever we get a chance, we'll unmute you. Cheris will ask you your name, kind of what you want to talk about, put you back on hold. You'll be hearing the show live as you wait, and then we'll unmute you, and you can talk to us live on the air. So that's not a preamble.
That's a little bit of preamble, but before we start taking calls, we want to talk about a few things, and one of them being how spiritually rewarding the Int X weekend workshop that we just did the last Saturday.
That was great.
How it really, so we haven't produced a new program in a while. It's been actually a while since we produce content all the time. We produce podcasts. We've been doing this, but as far as
we do our profile training twice a year.
And we do profile training. Yeah, exactly. And so we do. I mean, it always feels like we're producing content, but we actually haven't created a new program for a while. And so Int X Unleashed is, I think, the most recent program that we put together, and that's been about, I mean, it was like 2017 when we put that together and finalized it. And so when we were recommending people go check out Int X Unleashed, we decided to put together a workshop, which we just produced last Saturday. And it was supposed to be 3 hours, but I got chatty, as I have a tendency to do, and it ended up going 5 hours. And it was really, really good. We talked a little bit about people who, when they come to conversations, whether or not they're seeking information or whether or not they're seeking reassurance, and how being able to diagnose those two things is pretty huge for somebody who is under the assumption that everybody's seeking information. Because if a person comes to you looking for reassurance, but they couch it like they're looking for information, particularly INT types, INTPs and INTJs are going to be like, oh, this person wants information, and they'll take them at face value. And then if the person isn't looking for information, they're looking for reassurance, and the information doesn't provide said reassurance, then all of a sudden this perfectly innocent conversation starts to escalate, and it ends up in a fight where maybe both people feel betrayed. So we talked a little bit about how to diagnose whether or not a person is coming to you honestly for information, or if they're looking for reassurance, but they've couched it that they're looking for information. That spun off an awesome conversation. And we talked about a few other things about balancing your co-pilot and your 10-year-old and what that looks like. And it was just like a really, really great event. But I think what spoke to me is that we need to be doing more of that. We need to be doing more programs. And it's easy to kick the can of programs down the road. So we've been kind of hinting at it a little bit, but I just want to let people know, officially and informally, because we've got like half of the interviews under our belt, that we're creating a program right now that we're calling INFX Empowered. So it's like a companion piece to INFX Unveiled, which is more of a healing program. INFX Empowered will be a program that's about achievement orientation for personal development in INFPs and INFJs. And we've already interviewed a self-made millionaire who's an INFP, who gave some really awesome reframes on your relationship with money, particularly as an INFP. And we spoke about that whole concept of like, what does it feel like to sell out? And especially since he got his doctorate in art, and so he's an artist, and then how he sort of reframes his whole relationship with money to turn that into a form of art. Anyways, really good. We have an INFJ that we've interviewed who talks a lot about leaving codependent relationships and how to diagnose codependence. And we also talked to an INFP that talked a lot about intimacy and judgment from other people. One of my favorite things that she mentioned is Krishnamurti's comment that judgment is a knife. It's a knife not to stab people, but it's a knife to cut connection. That's what judgment does, is it cuts connection between people. And she said the best way to have other people's judgment affect you is if you take the knife and swallow it. So the only way that a person's judgment can successfully cut connection within yourself and make you feel bad is if you take the knife and swallow it. And just lots of great pearls of wisdom like that. So we've got a few more of those interviews on the horizon, and then we're going to put together an entire program, INFX Empowered, which will be very similar to Int X Unleashed, which is a series of interviews with council members and then high quality tips and strategies to deal with some of the biggest pain points and challenges that INFPs and INFJs face. So anyway, I'm super excited about doing that program. And like I mentioned, all the programs we've been doing lately and all the content we've been creating for that has been super rewarding. So anyway, just to let you know.
I love interviewing the INFPs because I always get all sorts of pearls of wisdom for my introverted feeling co-pilot growth. I'm always like taking notes and like, oh, this is really good stuff.
Yeah, he's the opposite. Like when he has to do the tech, as we had a little bit of technical challenges before we started this particular episode, and Joel's brain gets onto the tech piece and he can't concentrate on the content piece, which is actually one of the reasons why I end up doing the lion's share of talking. One of the reasons why I do a lot of talking is because Joel's brain is, some of his mental real estate is applied toward the production component. And so he frees me up to just yammer on and talk, and I don't have to think about any of that stuff. But Joel does have to think about it, so he ends up doing a lot less talking than I do. But when it comes to interviewing INFPs, like the tables turn. And he's not in the production at all. So fortunately, he sets it all up beforehand, and then he just like hands himself over to the experience. And then when we were interviewing Annie, that INFP that talked about judgment as a knife, Joel was just there. He was just like in the interview, and it was beautiful.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about extroverted feeling
and
introverted feeling a little bit, because we just released, if you haven't seen this yet, if you're watching live, you should go and check out our podcast from this week. We talked about the difference. I think I sent an email out this morning. I call it the Battle of the Feelers. I don't know if it's an actual battle.
It's a very evocative email that you sent out.
It was a good clickbait title for an email where you go, wait, the Battle of the Feelers, what's up with this? So we talk a little bit about how out in the wild, I've seen a lot of like introverted feeling users like myself get called selfish by extroverted feeling users like FJs in the Myers-Briggs system, saying, you FPs are so selfish. It's all about you. You want it to all be selfish and self-focused. And I look at them and I go, well, you're groupish. You're like, you want the group to win out over my individuality. So we actually talked a little bit about this, well, not a little, the entire episode is dedicated to talking about kind of this, like taking two different sides, and Tony kind of takes the extroverted feeling side. I take the introverted feeling side. We don't really have a debate, but we do unpack a conversation around kind of taking two different perspectives around how this looks for us. And I asked the question in there, I say, basically I pose this question, I say, at what point does a group of extroverted feeling people, like a group, have to be together, or just an extroverted feeling person think about this? How big does the group have to be when it's no longer selfish? So if me, like let's say it's a huge group of 100 people, and me by myself wants to do something individuated away from that group, sometimes I feel like extroverted feeling would say, well, you're selfish from individuating away from the group. What if I had 2 people with me? Would I be selfish then? What about 10 people? What about 50 and 50? Which group of those 2 groups is selfish? Like, how many people do I have to amass before extroverted feeling doesn't feel like my individuation away from what the collective wants isn't seen as selfish? So I kind of posed that question in the podcast, and I'd love to hear your feedback if you go and listen to that and make comments underneath and let us know what your thoughts are.
Somebody mentioned, one of the comments under the podcast was that they were disappointed that we didn't spend more time talking about extroverted feeling or harmony beyond its desire to influence others to think the same. Yeah. They wish that we had spent more time talking about the other aspects of extroverted feeling or harmony, like getting other people's needs met. But one of the reasons why we focused on the component of influencing the group is because that's the component that people think is selfish. Like that's the thing that they read from extroverted feeling or harmony as being selfish. I think if we were going to go into the component of extroverted feeling or harmony as getting other people's needs met, that takes on a selfish sort of component when the person enters a codependent relationship, and then serving others becomes a way to make themselves indispensable and have a form of control over the other person or the individual. And so then it becomes sort of this I give in order to control and to take, which is a little bit more of a thorny like relationship that people create. And so, yeah, that can be pretty selfish by other people, especially if it's used in a way to control the people that they're serving. But I think a person has to have a high degree of awareness to even observe that that's what's going on, because it's very counterintuitive. It's also very difficult to call the person on it. And most people who have entered those kinds of relationships have a hard time identifying it in themselves. I would say that one of the best, not examples, but expressions of how that type of relationship can form is not just in reading about traditional codependent relationships, but also Enneagram 2s have a tendency to have this sort of I give in order to take, and I give in order to control and make sure that I've got my people that will give me love back. And so not to conflate extroverted feeling or harmony with Enneagram 2. They're not the same thing. They're two different facets of a similar behavior, but they're in a similar ballpark. So a person can use extroverted feeling or harmony and be a different Enneagram type, but they'll manifest some of those behaviors that you'll see come up in Enneagram 2s. Anyway, it's just kind of an interesting conversation that's going on underneath that podcast. And if you haven't heard the podcast yet, we recommend go and check it out.
Yeah, and let us know your feedback. Let us know what comes up for you.
Yeah.
We want your voice to be represented in these different shows. Yeah. So next week, we're actually not going to be doing a live show next week. We're going to do it 2 weeks from now. We'll have the schedule online somewhere. The reason is we're going down to North Carolina to attend Dr. Beatrice Chestnut and Ronnie Opius's The Way of the Symbol Enneagram Workshop. So this is not learning the system. This is in going and doing 3 days of personal growth work using the Enneagram system. And we've been working with Beatrice for like 2 years now in the Enneagram program, the Enneagram Roadmap here at PH. And she's been talking about this for a while. And so I'm very excited because we finally made this happen to where her and her business partner are teaching close enough to where we can actually attend. So we don't have to fly to like Europe, because she teaches all over the world now. And the workshops are like in China and Europe and Brazil. California is like the closest to us until this North Carolina one came up. We're like, wait, we got to go do this. So we're really excited. So we'll report back to you on the next live show how that goes and what that's like. I think they actually lay out on the floor, from what I think they do, an entire giant Enneagram symbol. And during the work, it's a lot of movement and physical, like kinesthetic work. You're tapping into, I guess it's energies or something around. I actually don't know at all. But you move and you walk or you dance over the symbol, and you move to different locations as you're like going through different personal growth exercises. That's about as much as I know about it now. I just trust Beatrice enough to sign up without knowing anything else besides that. So I'm really excited about it. And we'll have to report back to you. I'll let you know how it goes for us next week.
So speaking of the Enneagram, I have an observation about the typology community in general, and one that I see I saw manifested in the Enneagram community, right? The Enneagram, in people who love the Enneagram first. And I've realized that I think that it actually is a phenomenon that touches all typology systems and people who are into typology and communities around typology. And I noticed it in the Enneagram because Enneagram was introduced to me as a system that is intended to help people transcend their egos. So because that's how it was introduced to me first, I went, oh, everybody who's into Enneagram must be into ego transcendence. And that must be everybody in that community. It must be filled with people who are highly spiritual and all they want to do is transcend egos and chop wood and carry water. So I had this kind of idealistic perspective of people who were naturally attracted to the Enneagram. And when I had my first half a dozen experiences with people who are super into the Enneagram, who I don't know if they're really focusing in on that ego transcendence work thing so much. I at first took it as, that whole thing when you have an over-idealized perspective about something and then you get bit or whatever and it doesn't pan out the way that you thought it was supposed to, and then you get mad at the thing, right? Like as if somehow your original unrealistic idea of how reality should be panning out doesn't pan out, so then you're mad at everybody else, right? Because they were the wrong ones. All right, I had one of those moments about the Enneagram where I went, nobody in this community is into ego transcendence. Everybody is in it just for themselves and their names, and and to lord it over that they're doing personal development and nobody else is, and they're doing it right. So like my lower self came up a little bit. And I think it's because it was billed to me as a system and community that was designed for that. And then, of course, I did like maybe a couple minutes more thinking about it after I was no longer in my like, that you guys are wrong, right? Like it's all you. After I had a couple minutes of that, I realized that that's what I just described, that phenomenon of the ostensible reason for something to exist and people being attracted to it, and those people not necessarily representing that thing that it purpose or reason why it originally existed, is effectively what you see in almost every community and every system ever, right? It falls under the principle of the healer, heal thyself. We are attracted to different things because we know we have a need. We have a need that thing, that system, that technology, that community, the paradigm, that belief system, that institution, whatever it is. We have something that we need to address, and that community makes a promise or a mission statement, or, I mean, it doesn't have to be as intense as a promise. It just says it addresses that thing that we need. And so then we get attracted to it. And that means that the Enneagram, which is ostensibly an ego transcendence tool, is going to attract a bunch of people who need ego work. That's how that works. Myers-Briggs has just as much ego in it, has just as many people who are into themselves and their own ego, but without the pretension of having done ego transcendence work, because Myers-Briggs is not supposed to be an ego transcendence tool, or that's not what it's been billed all this time. So it has traditionally been billed as a way to help people work more efficiently with each other, right? More efficiently and effectively in like a work or business context. But the more that we start billing Myers-Briggs as a personal development tool, the more you're going to see people in the community who show up and want to, in some way, evidence or prove they're doing the work, and they may or may not actually have manifested into their best self because they're attracted to this because they need to do work, right? And almost all of us have a tendency to, particularly those of us who are intuitive, who can imagine where we're at when we're at our best self. And it's almost as if because we can project what that looks like, and we know the work we need to do, and we see who we would be after the work is done, we forget that pesky little detail of actually going on the timeline and doing all the work until we get there. Like if we can imagine it, it must have happened, right? Because my intuition is the real world. So if I can project my best self, I must have achieved my best self. And then we show up projecting that we've done all this inner development work and all this growth work. And the only reason why I thought that about the Enneagram community, not that the Enneagram community is particularly, they don't offend this rule more than any other context offends the phenomenon of that context attracting people who need that thing, right? Need that work. Enneagram is not particularly worse or better than any other community. It just experiences that phenomenon. And if there's an actual sociological phenomenon with a name around that, I would love to know what that is. But Myers-Briggs has always traditionally been an effectiveness tool, right? It's been a tool to grease the wheels of management and grease the wheels of business in some way, or at least that's what it's been billed as for like the last 30, 40 years. And that's kind of where it started. That's its roots, right? As an assessment that helps people find career placement for themselves. But the more we get into the personal development side of it, and the more that Myers-Briggs gets billed as that, the more we're going to attract people that need that work, and the more we're going to be experiencing this phenomenon as well. And so Myers-Briggs as a system will end up being someplace that attracts a lot of people who have a pretension around growth and development. And from my perspective, I'd rather pretension around having grown than a rebellion against the need to grow at all.
Wow.
That's my personal opinion. I'd rather people be pretentious than reject the concept at all, because there's at least a recognition for the need. And so that's my value statement. I think personal growth and development is an important thing. That doesn't mean I'm right. It doesn't mean it's true. It's not an empirical universal truth. And yet I find that when people are into growth, as long as they let go of, as long as they can mature past the pretension time period of believing that the dog and pony show is the same as the real thing, as long as they can grow through that time period and get to the other side, then the legit work really starts. That pretension time period is making peace, I suspect. That pretension of like, oh yeah, I'm totally doing the work, whatever the system you're using it. We use typology, use Myers-Briggs particularly, but whatever the system or technology you're using for growth or development, that time period of like, I'm totally doing the work. And it's so hard. Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard to do the work, right? And like owning how hard it is to do the work. That whole time period is, I believe, a time period where the person is actually revving themselves up when they say it's so hard, it's so hard, it's so hard. They're revving themselves up to actually be in the space where the work starts and the pain starts and the discomfort starts. It's almost like, oh, it's gonna hurt when I rip the band off. Oh, it's gonna hurt, it's gonna hurt, it's gonna hurt, right? And then you finally rip it off. And I think that time period of like, oh, I'm in it, I'm in the work and it's so hard. I don't think that that's that bad. I mean, I'm just kind of mocking it, right? With my whole like little hands over the heart. I'm like, oh, that appears to be mocking, but it's more trying to sort of create a metaphor for what I'm talking about, because I think you guys know what I'm talking about. I think that that's that time period where you're revving yourself up for the moment of discomfort, because when people get into true growth work, they almost always disappear, right? When you're really in it, when you're really in a growth time period, you're not talking about how hard it is because you're doing it, because it's hard, right? Like you don't have a lot of space and room to talk about how hard it is. Now, once you've gone through a level, or you've leveled up, or you've gone through something, you can retrospectively go, oh my gosh, that was really hard. But you're in more of sort of a triumphant time period where like, whoa, I don't want to go through that again. I'm so glad that is done. And that was really hard. And then you're like, oh, and I get a chill for a minute. But the only reason, I think the reason why I'm addressing this or talking about it, and I, of course, want to hear what you have to say as well, Joel, who probably at this point is sort of like resting into the fact that the tech is complete. The reason why I want to mention this is we're going to see this phenomenon happen more and more and more in the Myers-Briggs community in particular, in the typology community. And number one, if this is you, it's totally fine. Number two, if it's somebody else, it's totally fine. So as we mentioned before, where we said that judgment is a knife and it cuts people's connection and relationship to each other, if you feel yourself in a time period of this pretension of like, oh, right, that's okay. I think that's part of the process. You're further along than somebody who is rejecting the need to grow at all. You are in a time period right now where you're galvanizing yourself for the work that's coming, right? You're psyching yourself up. You're telling yourself growth is hard. You're telling other people that growth is hard. And so you're setting an expectation in the world. So if this is you, or if this is somebody you know, hold space for yourself, hold space for the people who are doing this, because this is part of it. And when we can support each other through this, right, one of the best things you can do is have an honest conversation with yourself about what exactly is super hard about the growth work you're doing. Where are you out of your comfort zone? What are the gains you're seeing? Not just pain, right? Because pain is hard. And when you have trauma, that's going to feel like it's hard work. Just being in trauma is not hard work. Being in trauma is just hard, right? It's not work, it's just pain. It's just so much pain and so much suffering if you're not doing work to get through the trauma and heal from it. So be careful not to conflate the pain of having trauma with the pain of doing growth work to get yourself through trauma and to the other side. So that's one little sort of calibration you can do. But if this is you, hold space for yourself, because the next phase, when you start to honestly talk to yourself and go, am I really growing? Is this really something I'm doing? What was I galvanizing myself up? When I was saying it was really hard, what was I really sort of like getting myself in the zone to start working on? And then you start working on it. And then in some ways you kind of almost disappear from the conversation, because now you're in the work, and that occupies so much mental real estate. It's like hard to go on social media and tell everybody how hard growth work is, because you're in it. It's like how when you actively are in physical pain, The only times you really have time to like tell everybody how much physical pain you're in is when the pain's subsiding for a minute and you want some sympathy for what you're going through, which is totally appropriate, by the way. So if you're going through a hard time and you're looking for support, that's completely appropriate. But just kind of just watch out and keep your finger on the pulse of conflating the desire to do growth work, having a technology to do growth work like a typology system, and the reporting of hard work with the actual real thing. Like recognize that just because you can imagine yourself at your best, you still have quite a bit of work to get there, and that's a good thing because the process is actually quite rewarding and there's a lot of gain. So anyway, that was my little riff that I wanted to do on ego and typology systems. Did you have anything that you wanted to say about that?
Not now. No, I'm kidding. No, it was that was good. I think the thing I've noticed in my life is I've used ego development as a badge of honor to continue to preserve my ego in the middle of growth at times. So something I've always had to check in with is like, oh, I'm like doing ego work better than other people that are doing ego work, quote unquote. Like I'm at the top of the leaderboard. And it's like, that's not really what it's really about. But I've gotten caught up in that
opposite.
a lot. Like, I don't know. It's just like something that naturally happens. Like we find ways to hierarchize ourselves. I don't know if that's a word. Find hierarchies in anything we do, basically, and we strive and compete, and I think that's just human nature. And so I've just had to give myself a pass, catch myself doing it when I've done it, and and just be like, you know what, hold space, keep moving. Like it's part of being human. I think we all do it. Yep.
But just the fact that you're attracted is a good sign.
Yeah.
Just the fact that you want to be a part of that dialogue.
Yeah.
That you are attracted to technologies that are about growth, that actually is a positive sign. So rest in all the positives and catch yourself some slack when you do some of the negatives. Because I know that I have a pretentious streak in me. All right. So
So just wanted to let you know, we have an option for you to call in as a live caller. You can talk to us live on the air. The number's in the description and in the comment field. So just call that number. It's a United States-based number. If you're overseas, outside the United States, just get on Skype, buy a Skype credit, or use an international calling card. Those are the things anymore. I don't know. But get on here with us, people in Europe.
Yeah, burn them on us.
I guess it's in the middle of the night in Europe right now.
Yeah. Get up, get out of bed, and burn your credits on us.
Well, absolutely. So call in and be a part of the show. We want to hear from you. We want to take your questions and comments live on the air. We want to talk to you about stuff.
But before we do that, we actually have a profiler training student who has volunteered to talk a little bit about some of the major ahas that he's gotten recently about his type, and particularly an identity crisis. So we have our profiler training student, Michael Yagnow.
Hi, Michael. Are you there?
Hey, I'm here. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey, man.
Thanks for calling in.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Good to hear you.
Cool.
Yeah, so you just mentioned really quick, because I was like, hey, who's got an aha? And you said, I do. And you just mentioned it really quick, and we didn't do any more vetting than that. So this is all going to be new content to me, too, what you have to say. So I'm super excited. Why don't you share what your major aha was around? You mentioned it was around identity crisis, right? Being an INTJ?
Yeah, and more along the lines of like creative crisis. I mean, I think in exploring the system, especially through profiler training, the most interesting thing to me has been honestly learning about other types. I remember finding the podcast, and I listened to several of the other advice podcasts for other types before I even got to mine, which is INTJ. And there's something about, I think, being an INTJ that we have such an offbeat way of perceiving and engaging with the world that, you know, without that understanding of other types, it's almost like stepping outside is like throwing yourself into this like lunar social landscape, and everything is topsy-turvy, and it could lead to a lot of just extreme anxiety and dissonance if you're not in tune with whatever world you find yourself in. So in exploring other types, I mean, I'm as interested in understanding ESTPs or ISFPs or ENFJs as I am in understanding INTJs. And for me personally, it's also been the most helpful system I've found as a writer, because I write fiction And I never connected with any sort of writing advice, any of the hero's journey kind of stuff, which is based on Jung, but it's a different thing. But there's so much free play in Myers-Briggs, and especially if you put it together with Enneagram, that it's led to like this explosion of creativity that I was really looking for. Because I had an experience a couple of years ago where I'd written something that did get attention, and I found myself in a lot of meetings, pitch meetings, all this sort of stuff, and I felt completely alien to the world I'd been thrown into because I didn't have the frame that I have now, which was essentially that I was an INTJ thrown into this SP, NP world, and I felt like a total failure, and I floundered and I burned a lot of bridges, and it took years to get back to self-confidence to start working again. So I think, having been in that situation, if I had the frame of what was essentially happening was I was being pushed to do what I'd call ESTP work, and didn't have that sort of that reality tunnel built that I could go into, So in overcoming that, I mean that's what I was referring to as a crisis point. Was a huge step forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you a novelist, a screenwriter? What kind of writing are you doing?
I wish I could be a novelist. I can't write prose because it's the perfectionism takes over. So I do screenwriting because it's very action oriented. You're like barreling forward.
Yeah, that's cool. So I always thought it was interesting. Like I'll make comments to Antonio. We'll be watching a movie and we passively profile people like while we do stuff. I mean, we don't like intend to, but I'm like, what do you think that character's type is? And it's so interesting to me that screenwriters in Hollywood and even novelists, but let's just use screenwriters now because that's your trade. Like they write characters that are certain types that are so consistent without knowing the system. And I remember Antonio making a comment one time going, well, that just kind of shows just how accurate this diagnostic tool is in a lot of ways, because the characters in these stories are congruent with their type. Like if they're an INTJ, they seem to exhibit like extroverted sensing inferior behavior. Like they might be a little less sure of their body or something, or they might have some substance issues or something, like, or their FI, their introverted feeling 10-year-old, for an INTJ, and the character might show up in a way where they don't know who they are in relation to these other people, and they're a little protective. Like all the things that we talk about around types, screenwriters inherently kind of just add these characteristics into these characters they create, and without really knowing what they're doing, as far as I'm concerned. Like I don't think they know. Often, I don't know if all of them know their writing types, but maybe they do. I don't know if you've heard that in the screenwriting world or not. I don't know how that works. But
yeah, I mean, that was something that I was really beating myself up over, because I was like, character development, creating character was extremely difficult. And then you read something like, if you read the masters, like if you read Tolstoy, like something like War and Peace is like a parade of perfectly observed types. Yeah. And I'm like, why am I not getting this? And the fact was that I needed the system. I mean, as an INTJ, I needed the system in order to allow myself free play within the system, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a framework. Yeah, because you can kind of see when people don't have a framework and then they create characters that don't have any parallel in the real world, right? Like they have all these characteristics that are like almost disjointed.
Criminal Minds.
Yeah, so I love the show Criminal Minds, but one of the characters that always confuses me is Penelope Garcia, their technical analyst, who I'm like, I don't know if that character exists in real life. Like a diehard, just like such a ridiculously good cyber hacker that like she was hacking
into satellites like on
government,
the fly.
Yeah, exactly, government stuff, and so then she ended up getting like arrested and was forced to work for the government because her hacking skills were so amazing. But then at the same time, like I think she's pretty clearly an ESFJ, and I'm like, not that an ESFJ couldn't get into technical stuff, but I'm not sure if that they would like
be a world-class hacker.
Yeah, would be
got caught by the FBI.
Such a good hacker that they were caught by the FBI to like then forced to like work for them. So I'm like, I don't know if that person exists in real life. So you can kind of see where there's almost like a like when writers don't have that framework, and then they create characters that are kind of fun in the fact that they wouldn't necessarily exist anywhere else except for that particular character.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think if there are any types that it comes most intuitively to, it's perceiving types, just based on writers who I generally have passively profiled or even friends, you know?
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right. So, was that your aha? Was this like, there's a system here, a system that helps me in my creative endeavors. There's a system here that helps me interface with the rest of the world as an INTJ that feels like I'm such so offbeat that being able to observe other people and have a system for understanding them allows me to then like actually have a way to interface. Was that the aha, or was there an aha on top of that?
Yeah, it's just so many ahas within that, right? It's like you feel less like you're on a Martian kind of landscape when you have an understanding of. Again, it was going outward and, you know, exploring the functions I don't have, exploring the functions that are, you know, apart from my own. So yeah, so many ahas within that. Yeah.
Definitely. So just before we disconnect, I want to ask you, as an INTJ, maybe since you've joined profile training or just since you've, you know, like started understanding the system more, has there been like a major aha for you as an INTJ? They're like, oh, this is a game changer for me and my type and understanding my type.
Absolutely. I mean, I identify with I mean, I feel like the archetypal INTJ. And the first time I took the official test, I mistyped as an INFJ, and I disregarded the system because I did not identify with the type. I mean, some parts, but not. I think, yeah. And in my personal life, it helped me reframe. I mean, this is a whole other conversation, but I have had addiction issues in the past, and even though I'd gotten over those through 12-step, I have a new frame to look at what was underneath that problem that I hadn't had before in exploring, especially my inferior function, which was SE, because I'd been telling myself that I was a cosmonaut and a visionary, and I was doing this to feed, you know, to enhance my NI, even though I didn't have the language for it then. But then in exploring actually what my inferior, my 3-year-old function is, it reframed it and actually made the problem seem smaller, you know?
Like more manageable.
Yeah, more comprehensible, that I had the wrong frame on what was, you know, underlying that all, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate you being willing to show up and talk a little bit about your experience and some of your ahas as an INTJ.
Awesome. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
All right. Thanks,
man.
Michael. Bye.
Cool. That's awesome. Screenwriter.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's not uncommon, actually. I think, so my brother has a writing partner who's an INTJ. And my brother's an ENTJ, and I think the combination of the two of them helps move away from any of the perfectionism. Because Ty said that as an ENTJ, whenever his INTJ writing partner gets too chatty, he just throws in an explosion. He's like, no more talking. We need to throw in an explosion. Yeah. So his writing gets more exciting. All right.
Well, and your brother takes way more to TV, because so they started writing novels together. They sold a series of those novels, and then it got picked up by the Sci-Fi Network and Amazon, and now he's the showrunner or one of the executive producers, not the showrunner, but one of the executive producers on the show. And ENTJs, I think, are very, very, they lend themselves well to that kind of role, like an executive producer role, because you get to kind of be in charge as well as write and create. So you get to kind of go do like all these different roles. I'm sure INTJs like that too.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
It's a very NTJ world, I bet.
I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up jumping track from novelist to TV showrunner, because it's way more his world. Like, it's very extroverted sensing. It's very high energy. It's very go. And so I think one probably is his inroad into the other. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
All right.
It's fun seeing what goes into all that stuff too.
It is very interesting. All right. So yes. You know, I've been doing so much talking. Why don't you talk?
Yeah, no, I was going to say we have a call-in number. If you want to call and be live on the air like Michael was just now, please feel free to call that number. It's in the description or in the comments. I'm not going to say it live here in case you're watching the replay back. You'll call and it won't go anywhere. But if you're with us live right now, as we speak, as you hear me say these words, just dial that number. It's a US-based number. You can talk live on the air with us. We don't get any callers. That's cool. We'll riff about some stuff and we'll close out the show. But we'd love to create this show. So what we're doing with this show basically is each week we're adding different elements. We're testing things in season 1. This is our 3rd episode in season 1. We're testing things. We're testing, talking a little bit about some of the things we've just been working on, highlighting some of the podcasts. We're going to have maybe some guest callers call in that we're going to invite to call in to talk about some of the ahas or personal growth things that they went through. Often what I tell people right before our profiler training question and answer every month, so once a month for all of our profiler training students, we've been doing this for 5 years, every month, at the end of the month, we do a Q&A for anybody, alumni or current students in profiler training. And the 3 things I always say at the beginning of the calls is I say, you can organize your basically speaking up in 3 ways. You can talk about something since the last time we talked, like a celebration, something you finally got an aha around, something you realized. You're like, oh, that's how introversion and extroversion work. Okay, I get it, or whatever the aha might be. So you can celebrate and basically, articulate the things you've been learning. So that's something that you could do here. Or if there's something you've got a question around, maybe a sticking point, like a challenge you want to solve, some kind of a question or some coaching you want around your personality type or how you show up in the world, that's also an option. So celebrations, questions, and sticking points. And then the other thing is you could talk about maybe something that you are in the next, 2 weeks to 30 days going to work on in your life that's a personal growth challenge for yourself. So you get on the air and you say, hey, Joel and Tony, I just want to share something with you guys. So I'm an ENTP, and I've been working really hard on XYZ, and in the next 30 days, I'm going to work on the X part of XYZ, at whatever that is, fill in the blank, right? And so you talk about maybe something you're going to challenge yourself in the next 30 days. We could talk about that live on the air, too. So those are 3 ideas if you're coming and saying, now I want to call in, I want to talk to Joel and Antonia live on Personal Hacker TV, but I'm having trouble gathering my thoughts really quickly. Those 3 questions, celebration, questions or challenges, and challenges for yourself or goals you want to set for yourself are 3 areas you could call in and talk live on the air. Do we have any other comments or things you want to highlight while we're here?
This is a technical thing, so I'm not sure if I should mention it on the air, but one person mentioned that they tried to call in, but that they weren't getting through for some reason.
Well, if you can't get through, the phone lines are jammed. Keep calling. I don't know if it's jammed or not.
No, if somebody
could
try to call in so that we know whether or not that's that's something that was specific to one person or whether or not that's a general challenge. Somebody mentioned that they're too introverted to call in. No, you're not. Get through. Push through. Right? Get out of your comfort zone.
And I'm on here. Come on.
That's right. Push through. Get through your comfort zone. If you got to take a shot at tequila, go ahead. So
in the early days.
In the early days of Personality Hacker, way back in 2010, when we taught the first profiler training class.
The webinar would get ready to kick on.
Oh no, was that 2010 or 2011? Okay, so we would it wasn't even a webinar. It was like audio only.
Audio webinar.
Yeah, it was like an audio webinar. Didn't even have complex slides or anything to go through. It was just audio. And I would get so nervous teaching in front of this. It wasn't a very large group. It was maybe 12. 5, 7 people, 12 at the most, right? Early days.
Yeah.
I would get so nervous. I would have to take a shot at tequila. I would take a shot at tequila before I started teaching. And there were
version 1.0 was just an incredible class, by the way.
That's right.
Of all the tequila involved.
I was always sauced, right? And I would get really nervous, and I would have to drink if I didn't have a shot of tequila beforehand, I would drink wine. And I'm surprised I got through all of that.
Why did you choose tequila? Just because that's what we had around?
That's what we had around.
Okay.
And it's the alcoholic preference of my people, right?
That's right.
So so I have a.
You're French.
On my father's side.
Okay, I was just say the French drink
That's
tequila.
Right. Yeah.
All those cactuses outside of Paris.
That's right. California Spaniard on my mother's side. So yeah. So the tequila is the drink of my people on my mom's side. So anyway.
Wine is the drink of the people on your.
And wine would be the drink of the people on my father's side. That's right. So
was it cognac? Is that a French thing?
Cognac? Yeah, I do believe that's all Francais. Anyway, but the point was if you need to get yourself a little sauced, go for it.
It's after 5 o'clock on the East Coast.
It totally is. It totally is. It's 6 o'clock.
What else are you gonna do on a Wednesday evening, right?
That's right. Drink and call personality hacker.
Shots of tequila and call
That's
us.
right. We also won't judge if you take a hit. If you take a hit off a bong, we're not going to judge. It's going to be fun.
The authorities in your state or locale might, but we won't. Okay. Well, actually, we kind of do judge. We have a very judgmental poster behind you.
That's right.
The Devil's Harvest poster.
You're right.
Talking
we are
about
judging
a
you.
vicious racket with its arms around your children, sin, degradation, vice, debauchery.
It's the smoke of hell.
It's the smoke of hell. Satan will use this to get his hands
That's
into
right.
your
As we all
life.
know, if you smoke the marijuana, you'll take an axe to your family. We know that. We choose to live dangerously.
Or you start a car company.
Or you start a car
Electric car company. One of the two.
One of the two.
You sell PayPal for millions and start a car company.
That's right.
Okay, I think we have people online
Nice.
coming in. So let's go over here to Lynn. Lynn, are you there?
Let's see.
Did it not adjust? Hold on, let me refresh.
Okay.
Let's try this again. Let's try this one more time. Having some tech troubles. It is churning.
It's churning. Mm-hmm.
All right, I have no idea what's going on with Lynn. It won't let us reach you, Lynn.
Yeah.
It's saying no.
We're hitting the button, but it doesn't like us.
Do you always use Chrome for this?
I
do
don't
we
know.
always use Chrome? I mean, do you ever use Firefox? Should I log in on Firefox and see if that works? Or that just messed stuff up? Oh, no, because I'm already in Chrome, huh?
I'm not sure what's happening with Blog Talk Radio, actually.
Hang tight.
Hang tight.
I'm trying here. All right, so what I'm going to do...
You want to try the next one down and see if it... Lynn, hang tight. It might not be... We're going to try to do the person next to you, underneath you, and see if that one goes through.
This, like,
Oh, and then
that call just
disappeared.
completely dropped off.
Okay.
All right, we'll try Lynn one more time here.
We say it's a call-in show. We make promises.
We can't keep.
Our mouth makes promises our tech can't keep.
You know it.
Hmm.
Here we go. Lynn, are you there? Hold your fingers. It says she's here, but we're not hearing her. Huh.
Lynn, you should be there.
Let me put you back on hold. Hey, Cheris, would you try something from your room? Would you try putting Lynn's mic on for me?
Yeah, it looks like it's on.
Okay. So one thing I might do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, might have her now.
Okay.
All
Try
right,
the mic again.
you want to bump it into the mic, or you want me to? It could be because Cheris and we both have an instance of this open. It could be causing wonkiness, I don't know. But it should not. It's designed for screening. So I clicked the mic and it put her into the control room with Cheris.
I'm hearing something. Lynn, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let's try that again though. So
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
we
good.
can.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Lynn. We can hear you. Okay, great. Let me do a quick. Hi, Lynn. Are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Hang on. Let me mute what I'm seeing on the.
Sure.
Let me mute it. Okay.
We'll try that one more
So
time.
I'm Lynn from Oklahoma.
Well,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi,
So
this is
sorry.
Lynn.
Because of all that challenge,
Yeah.
I won't be able to use this as a clip in the future if I don't do a clean edit point.
So Joel is at the producer
So,
mind.
Okay.
I'm giving a gift to my future editing self of a clean edit point here. So I'm so sorry we had all that technical trouble. We can totally hear you now, which is great. Thank you for turning down your background.
Mhm.
I'm going to pretend like we just put you live on the air, though. Okay. So here we go.
Okay.
Hey, Lynn, are you there?
Hi, this is Lynn from Oklahoma.
Hi, Lynn. Thanks for calling
Thanks
in.
for
Thanks so much. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for answering my write-in question last week. I'd like to hear more of your perspective on the influence of outside factors on our personalities, like family and health. I'm pretty sure that I'm a mild ENFJ, not super extroverted naturally. Like I wouldn't be a leader of a cult or anything. But I grew up with an ESTJ dad, I think that's what he was. and an ISFJ mom. And so I felt a lot of pressure from my dad to be more extroverted and more dominant than I am. And so more like an ESFJ. And I pushed myself to be that, to please him. So the N hasn't been as developed as I think it would have been if my parents were Ns. I have some characteristics of ESFJ, but I've always felt like I didn't quite fit and was trying to make myself be that. And then as I've learned more about this, it seems like, oh, this is it. This is the answer. This is why I don't fit there. And then with my health, I'm not as E as I used to be. And I feel more and more myself in the INFJ characteristics as they're developing. But I definitely lead more with the FE than the NI. I've never been the wise old soul. So I just like to hear more of your perspective on those kind of things, like how other things can influence it, and you still are. I think I am an ENFJ, but I've just felt so much influence from other places.
Sure. Well, by the way, I wish I knew where the article was. I just read yesterday. Oh man, I wish it was a reputable source of somebody that had done a study, and they were talking about how everybody gets more introverted as they age. So as we get older, even the most hardcore extroverts get more introverted the later on in life happens. So it would make sense. It's normal and natural, I think, for all of us, even us extrovert types, to start becoming more introverted as we age, because we're getting more in touch with those parts of us that we weren't as in touch with when we were younger. And also being younger, it makes more sense when we're at the beginning of our relationship lives, when we're trying to meet a mate or partners, and we're trying to establish our career or our lives or raise our kids. We have to basically be out there more in the world. And then later in life, I think we have the option to lean back a little more and be more reflective as time moves on. So I think it's both probably how we're wired as people, but also just the circumstances that we all have in life that allow us to become more introverted as we get older. So I think that's probably natural to feel that way.
Yeah. So I think you already have hit on the phenomenon, which is that we are influenced by a lot of different things in our lives, not just our cognitive function stack. All right, let's pretend that cognitive functions were born with the preferences for the stack that we have or the car model that we have. Let's pretend that those are set and that we end up sort of filling, like that's the operating system underneath, and we end up filling our minds with a bunch of programs that start running on top of that operating system. Let's pretend that that's nature, not nurture. And effectively what you're saying is that, or asking is, what are all the other influencers in our life that are maybe or nurture, not so much nature? Like if our personality type is, arguably something that we sort of come out of the package with, including things like our Enneagram type and that sort of thing. How important is nurture to us? And the answer is it's vitally important, and it influences us in a million different ways. This is why no two human beings are the same, even if they have the same wiring. Like I run into ENTPs all the time that are very different from me. And I kind of wonder how those are the messages and those are the programs running that they were able to place on top of an operating system that leads with extroverted intuition and supports it with introverted thinking. Like sometimes I'm almost baffled. But then I think, well, of course, like because our brains are open for imprints all the time. So I think that's one of the reasons why I like the concept of, number one, systems thinking. Systems thinking recognizes that there's a bunch of nodes running in a system that then gives it an emergence. And so instead of thinking in terms of cause and effect, which is like, oh, this is my personality type, therefore I behave this way, which is very cause-effect thinking. What's nice about systems thinking is that you recognize that there are many causes to a single effect. There are many, many, many different things that come into it. So how much do all those things influence us? I don't know if we have an answer for how much, but I would say substantially. The answer is substantially. How the personality types of your parents, the messages they gave you, whether or not they gave you permission to be how you're naturally wired or tried to shoehorn you into the way that they felt you should be, generally based on what made sense to them and what was obvious and apparent to them. The different paradigms they gave you, the scripts they gave you, the attachment style that you ended up with based on parenting. And then that doesn't include like influencers that were just people who were highly influential in your life, your siblings, your other extended family members, people at school that you looked up to. So lots and lots and lots of different influencers come in. I think instead of just talking to whether or not those things influence us, which they do, and how much they influence us, which is an unknown quantity, I would actually say that when you're thinking about these things, I would recommend that you use a tool so that you can determine how much of those things influenced you as an individual. So instead of sort of abstracting it and going, how much do these influence us as people, I think it's more beneficial to figure out how much they influence you as an individual. And so one of the things that I like to do whenever I'm trying to figure out how either me or something I'm believing or a piece of programming or a behavior set, whenever that's what I call the emergent, so I put it over sort of in a circle over here on a piece of paper. I put the emergent over here, the result, the thing I'm looking at. And then I try to diagnose how that thing was inevitable based on the system that was running. And so in systems thinking, there's a couple different principles you want to remember. Number one is something called, and by the way, are you familiar with systems thinking, like as a technology? Or like a...
No, okay. I'm not.
So I highly recommend looking into it because it's fascinating, and you'll almost always see systems thinking in terms of like business applications or engineering or things like that. Just take the principles of systems thinking and apply it to the context of relationships, because introverted thinking and extroverted thinking, or accuracy and effectiveness, loves systems thinking as it relates to concepts and ideas and engineering, like building things. But people who use extroverted feeling and introverted feeling are natural systems thinkers when it comes to human interpersonal dynamics.
You're already thinking this way. You just don't have language for it yet. Like your extroverted feeling, if you're an ENFJ, you're already doing this.
Yeah. Exactly. You're systems thinking when it comes to like the people in your life. So,
and the best place to start, by the way, we recorded a whole podcast on it. You can just go and listen to our podcast, give you an introductory, and then there's some recommendations of where to jump from there. If you're like, how do I learn systems thinking, guys? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Our podcast might be a good place to start.
Yeah, totally.
We talked about it.
Okay.
So, but just to give you a couple different principles, one of them is called the principle of initial conditions, which is what were the starting conditions when this system got formed. So for you as a human being, what were your initial conditions? So your initial conditions would include things like the personality types of your parents, where you lived, what time period in history it was, the socioeconomic situation that you found yourself in, like all sorts of things that basically were what was the context when you arrived, right? And those things are going to follow you throughout your life. And so you just sort of make notes of those different influencers in the initial conditions. And then you take each what's called a node, or something that influences the emergent, right? So the result is the emergent. You take all the things that you believe are a factor in that result. So things like, if it comes to identity, things like who were the biggest influences in your life? What is your personality type in each of these different systems? And each of the different systems would be a different node. Maybe some of the traumas you experienced throughout your life, and some of the things that you got through and were triumphant around. So the traumas and the triumphs and how they impacted you. Memories that you have of moments that were very key and that left imprints, right? Like the world works in this way, are very important nodes or factors in all of this. And then when you write all of these different things down, then you can determine their size of influence by, I'll oftentimes just make a whole bunch of symbols, right? And then have arrows pointing to each other. So like it looks a little bit like this, if you can see it on the Facebook live screen.
We're diagramming now.
Yeah, I'm just going to diagram it really quick. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, but I'll just kind of make little symbols. And I'll name them different things. This is oftentimes what my systems will look like. So you see the word emergent, that's the result. And then all of the symbols, I've got like a circle and a heart and a diamond and a square and like a star. And they all reference different things. And if you notice, there's arrows that are pointing back and forth between each of those symbols. And the reason why is each of those things has a relationship to each other. So if the emergent is, let's pretend the emergent is Antonia. So I'm trying to figure out me, right? Antonia.
Okay.
And Enneagram, Enneatype, and how about mom, dad? And in my upbringing, religion was a big deal, or paradigm. And I would say brother or sister is a big one. They were highly influential. And let's say the last one is like, I don't know, I'm a Gen Xer. Let's pretend that's a big deal. All right. And so I just make a little note. I write it out. Each of those symbols has a different assignation of how it influences who I am. And then I start to determine whether or not these are bigger or smaller depending upon the context. So if I'm trying to determine why I'm such an old fussy person that talks a lot of crap about the younger generation, then of course, being a Gen Xer is going to be one of the more, you know, one of the more influential nodes in that system. So then that node gets bigger, right? It expands in shape, or size rather. And then if I'm trying to figure out, like, you know, why I love systems thinking so much, being a Gen Xer gets smaller, and then my Myers-Briggs type gets bigger. So I make one of these anytime I'm trying to diagnose how something came into existence. And I just create a simple little system. And my recommendation is when you ask the question, how much of an influence are all of these things? Well, then you would probably put things in there like the fact that you have a condition, right? Like you have health issues. That's probably going to be a big node in some elements of who you are. And it's going to be a much smaller node in other elements of who you are. So determine what the emergent is. Is it just your identity, or is it who you are in this context, or who you are in this other context? And then create like a quick little system of those things that are influential. And anytime, as a person who uses extroverted feeling, when it comes to your identity, this is going to be probably a little more difficult to sort of all parse out. But the way you'll take to this whole system thinking like a fish to water is when you're trying to diagnose relationships. So if the emergent in a relationship is like strain, okay? So you're like looking at it like strain in the relationship.
Like a couple
is the emergent.
fighting, for example, right?
Exactly. Then write all of the factors that you think are going into strain. And then as you look at all of those factors or all those nodes, you determine which ones are the big influential nodes in it and the smaller influential, and then look for something that can be changed, right? Because when I do something that's for like Antonia, oftentimes my goal is to try to figure out how I can optimize Antonia. How can I get Tonia to a place where Antonia is at her best self? Then I'll look through all of those things and try to determine which of those things is something that I can influence and I can create a better relationship with. So I chose to go, well, Myers-Briggs. I can create a better relationship with my Myers-Briggs type and optimize that. So I'm going to focus on that one right now. And so if I start changing that node, then the whole system will now change because that node has a relationship with all the other nodes, and then my emergent becomes different, right? The result becomes different because I changed the system. And the same thing with like relationships. If strain is the emergent and you don't want strain to be the emergent, you go in, you look at all those nodes in the system, all those influencers, and you look for the one that you can change. And oftentimes it's just a matter of changing one of those nodes, and the whole system reorganizes itself oftentimes to make the emergent or the results different. And so anyway, that would be my recommendation when you're asking these questions about how does it influence us as human beings? The answer is we don't know because there's so many different systems running. So get really fascinated by the U system and really start to diagnose the U system, right? The Lynn system with creating some of these system maps and all these nodes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that's something I'm going to need to re-listen to this and think about more. But it seems like these days, anyway, my best self is kind of encouraging more of the INFJ characteristics, even though that's not who I am naturally, just because I don't have the energy to be an INFJ anymore. Okay, go ahead. Is that a possibility? I mean, can you kind of change over? Not that you change over naturally, but just change over how you behave?
So if that's the source of your real question, which is like, oh, could I just be an INFJ whose dad was like, be extroverted? And so I just was like, okay, I'll be extroverted. And then I just like forced myself into that hole, and I just was like, okay, but now I'm exhausted. Or am I an ENFJ that just has like all these health issues and I'm tired and like, oh, I can't even anymore, and is it wrong for me to be more introverted right now? The answer to both of those is the same, which is really convenient, which is that if you are an ENFJ that has a lot of health issues right now and just needs to attend to them and needs to give yourself some sort of space from the world, even if you weren't having health issues, your growth path as an ENFJ is to get into your co-pilot or auxiliary function of introverted intuition or perspectives. And so you want to go there. You want to have more alone time. So make sure that when you have alone time, that you're giving yourself plenty of space to do that introverted intuition or perspectiving work, which if you've not really been given a lot of permission to be in your intuitive process, that should feel like a joy. Like it should feel like a joy to just finally be able to be in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, you're like, yes, that does feel good. So doing things like learning about systems, learning about personality typology systems, learning about actually introverted intuition just gobbles up tons of information about a million different things so that it feeds its pattern recognition abilities, and then it can make all of those connections internally. And so, yeah, do that. If you're an ENFJ, do that. And if you're an INFJ that was just really encouraged to be extroverted a lot, then it sounds like you did a lot of extroverted feeling work. And then that means that you're ready to go to introverted thinking as an INFJ, which is accuracy or the 10-year-old function, which is more about getting into sort of the programming of your mind and how you were programmed with the thoughts that you were programmed with. And what that means to you, and whether or not you agree with some of that programming that was put in there, and whether or not you're living your radically honest truth. So yeah, it's like no, regardless of what the diagnostic is, the prescription is the same. Give yourself permission to have that alone time. Give yourself permission to have that, and determine which one is helping you feel like your best self. Is it getting into that intuitive process, giving yourself tons of time and space to go into that place? Or do you feel like you're at your best self when you're going through your belief system and belief structure and vetting it for things that you don't agree with anymore? But give yourself permission to go to both of those spaces, and your inner wisdom will help guide you to the place that you need to be, whether or not it's introverted intuition or introverted thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds really good. So with Enneagram, I'm pretty sure I'm a 2-1. Does that lean more towards ENFJ or INFJ, either one?
No. Each personality type can be any Enneagram type. So there are plenty of, I have seen more of a relationship with ENFJs and Enneagram 2, but I have known INFJs that are also Enneagram 2s. So yeah, it doesn't definitively tell you anything, but it is not uncommon for NFJs to be 2s.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynn, for calling in and chatting with us.
Yeah.
Asking a question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. That was really interesting.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Our pleasure. We'll talk to you real soon, okay?
Okay.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Cool. All right. Well, I think we're coming up on the end of the show today. Basically, we got to land the plane and wrap up. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question and you're watching this replay back, feel free to leave a comment or ask a question in the comment area right below or around the video somewhere. Obviously, we're going to post links to the things we mentioned in the show as well. So feel free to follow those rabbit trails wherever they lead, different episodes we recommend, different things we talk about that we'd love to highlight and showcase. And if you've got recommendations for the show, ways you'd love to see us, maybe topics you'd like us to tackle, ways of producing the show that you'd love to see, some ideas. We're still in the first season where we're doing a lot of test iterating. We're creating on the fly. We decided to create a framework and structure of 6 episodes for season 1. So we're going through those episodes, taking live calls, talking a little bit about some of the things that are coming that are up in the future and some things we just finished. And we're still workshopping this. So we'd love to hear your ideas as well.
Absolutely. Our Are we taking another call?
If we have more callers,
Okay.
call in.
Do you want to hit refresh?
The tech pieces.
What level of radically honest am I allowed to be on PhD?
As long as you give me edit points to take it out later, you can totally be as radically honest as you want.
Okay, so it's not going to be one of those things where I like start talking meta about what we're experiencing right now, and you get like upset. You're like, don't tell people that.
No, well, it depends on what are you gonna say. Like if you're, I mean, maybe I should say I have no idea because I have no idea what you're gonna say. It could be around like you're itchy or something. Like, oh, I'm so itchy.
It's not that I'm itchy. No, I was going to say I think that as we go through here, as we're getting better at this, I feel like we need to. I feel like when we take calls, I need to do a better job of ensuring that I know what the person's question actually is at the beginning of their call.
Before you start drawing a diagram
Before
off camera.
I start drawing diagrams.
It's like great live TV. I'm like, I was gonna make a joke, but I don't want to throw it to the bus. You're over here like drawing a diagram that only you and I can see, and everybody's just watching you draw out something, but
Well,
not even watching you
I
try.
showed it to the camera.
Well, you did show it. I'm giving you a hard time.
I know.
That was funny.
But it was like I like drew all that. I was like, is that helpful? And poor Lynn was like, kind of.
We'll do it.
Yeah, so poor Lynn. And Lynn's like, actually, what I really want to ask, and I probably should have said, what is it? What is your question deep down inside? So Lynn, thank you very much for being patient with me as I like diagrammed things out. And towards the end,
systems thinking is still a good thing to go look at.
we need to get better at callers with like strong beginnings and strong endings, right? Like, hey, caller, what's your question?
Well, the challenge with me is my mind is so attuned to the muting, unmuting. Like right now, I've already canceled. Like I've already hung up the phone on her call. It's still showing on this software.
I know. Yeah.
So the JavaScript software is wonky or something, on at least on Chrome. So the reason why I think if I wasn't thinking about the tech piece, I would be framing and starting and stopping these a lot better. But right now I'm just so preoccupied with all of the moving parts technically that I'm not doing that as well.
And towards the end, you're just like, okay, we're done with this call. Like, all right, thanks, Lynn. Donk. I can appreciate that. Do you want me? Because you're traditionally
we had just talked about that in the production meeting yesterday. So I was like, oh, okay. Like
we need to get we'll figure it out though. These are early days. Rapid prototyping. We're figuring it out. All right.
We're gonna watch years from now and be like, wow, those early shows were rough.
I know, right? We're gonna go back, just like early podcasts. I cringe whenever I hear the first year of our podcast. I'm like,
they're okay. Just a little tenuous.
I can't. But that's the thing, right? Isn't that public service announcement? If you want to do something, just do it and just eat the fact that it's going to suck in the beginning. Just eat it, right? Like you cannot prepare enough to make it not suck in the beginning, because most of the time it sucks not because of like, the technical stuff, although I mean maybe that makes it suck too, I don't know. But most of the time the reason why it sucks is because you're bringing your like, I don't know what I'm getting into energy into it. And so you're going to be hesitant, you're going to hold back, you're going to be like nervous, you're not going to be assertive, you're like, this is all new terrain that you're exploring. And you just got to explore it, because it doesn't explore itself. Yeah. You can never conceptualize what it's actually going to be until you get in there. And then once you get in there, you're like, oh, like the first time we spent 45 minutes trying to figure out what the echo problem was. And it ended up being that I had like a program, like GarageBand open, and it was echoing back. All right, so like that was like 45 minutes burned trying to figure out what that problem was, and it was me. It was an ID10T error, right? Do people even say ID10T anymore? I don't know.
I don't know what that is.
ID10T. Write it out. ID10T. What does it look like? Right? You know ID10T.
Don't say anything to anybody. You got to write it out.
All right, write it out.
ID, the letters ID.
ID10T, right?
The number 10.
Yeah, and do it all in caps. I used to be like
user error.
Yeah, user error basically. So it was like a total user error. And then the second time, like we couldn't hear anything, and it was like maddening, and I thought we were gonna blow our tops. And I was like, good thing we're doing energy work every week with an energy coach that has like helped us become super zen about everything, because otherwise we would have, like, you might have actually seen Joel's like brain throb and then blow out of his forehead. So that was the second time. And then like the third time we just didn't, like, nothing. We chose the wrong audio. I chose the wrong audio input, and we just got nothing. Crashing. Facebook kept crashing, and I chose the wrong audio input, and we just recorded nothing. So now we're doing a redo of episode 3. And this time I'm like, hey, I'm just going to spend 20 minutes not answering a question that you had. I'm just going to use you as a foil for whatever it is I want to talk about. Okay, is that all right? So anyway,
well, I think that's it. So if you're a content creator and you want to create content for the internet, whether it's live like what we're doing here, or recording, she's right. Like you have to just start the process, start creating something, even if it's small. Keep it small, keep it manageable, put it out there, like, or test it out, and then try again the next time. I remember way back, like 15 years ago, when I used to work at the zoo in Maryland. I started up a not a live TV show, but like an internet. It was like a year or two after YouTube had come out. No one even knew what YouTube was. But I'm out there with like a video camera trying to create like this this show, basically this video show, and it was horrible. Like the first couple episodes, I got an intern to help me. We just didn't know like what we were doing. The editing was off, the pacing was off, and I was so discouraged after we had the first episode done. We were like, I don't think this is going to work out. And I remember just like we just trashed it. We didn't even like release it. And I remember just like driving home that night, just feeling so depressed and so discouraged. And then I was like, wait a second, this is a work in progress. Like I don't have to have it perfect out of the gate. So then we went on to create more episodes. They got better and better each time we shot. Each time we shot a new one, we just changed something and made it better the next time. So if you're a content creator, you want to start a podcast or a video show or something you want to write or create or a website or some type of content creation, get started. And in the midst of it, often what can happen too is a bunch of ideas come from it. Like as we're sitting here, not only am I thinking about all the tech stuff and about the content and talking with you, if you call in live to the number that's posted in the description or the comments, but I also am thinking about all the new ideas I'm getting around, like, oh yeah, we should highlight that. We should read some Twitter posts. We should do this or this. So it helps open up creative ideas as well. Now we're both ENPs, so we're wired a little bit more for this.
Yeah.
If you're an INJ, you might be like,
it's true.
That sounds,
It's
I don't want to
true.
call a number, a US-based number to talk to you live on the air. How am I going to go and put myself out there without preparation? I understand. And yet I think you can make it through too. There's a lot of INTJs and INFJs that create a lot. So just because you're an INJ doesn't make you unable to create cool stuff.
That's true. Also, I'm very shiny with that.
Well, that's why they powder you in the makeup room on real TV.
I'm gonna have to put powder. I'm gonna have to put powder on.
Yeah, they come in.
So that I'm not shiny.
They powder you.
All these things to remember. Oh, so complicated.
Television's tougher.
All right.
Live video is like hardcore, man.
Yeah, when you podcast, you just have a microphone. Like you don't have to wear clothes. It's clothing optional.
We often do wear clothes, but you don't have to.
Yeah, we usually do wear clothes just because otherwise, like your skin sticks to your skin and it feels a little moist and uncomfortable. But that's pretty much the only reason why. But that's the great thing about podcasting is it's totally pants optional. And this isn't. We have to like.
This show is technically.
That's right. It's pants optional, but
it's above the belt.
Optional.
We can
that's
technically.
Right. This is not a nudist platform.
Unless I stand up to do something.
All right. So it looks like we had a little bit of technical issues with people calling in. Those of you who tried to call in after we told you to call in, but then got like booted by the technology we're using. My apologies. Thank you so much for supporting us by calling in, and we really, really, really appreciate it. And this is not the last one. Season 1 is rapid prototyping. We're figuring it all out right now. And so yeah.
3 more shows in season 1, and then we'll plan season 2.
That's right. And if you want to go to the schedule, it's personalityhacker.com/P.
Don't give this out because it'll change in the future. So
never mind.
It'll be posted somewhere.
We'll post it on Facebook, the schedule.
Because it'll be updated. The link will be changing depending on when you're watching this, years from now. So I don't want to give you anything in the actual video embed.
You jumped in front of me, didn't you? You like pushed me out of the way.
It might be a dead link. You never know.
That's right.
So,
I like that all the emojis every once in a while go bad, and there's a buy, right? Somebody does all the emojis, and one of them is the angry emoji.
It's furious.
I like the idea that we're infuriating somebody with a live show.
Close the browser.
Yeah.
Watch it. Go away.
No, I just keep doing it because it's hilarious. All right. Do you have anything else?
I don't.
Any calls right now?
I'm Joe Mark Witt.
I'm Antonia Dodge.
Thank you so much for being here on Personality Hacker TV, and we'll see you on the next episode.